Even though we were back to where we had started with just the two of us, I continued to book locations to film. We were still in search of finding that missing third piece, but it didn't stop us. I managed to book this haunted inn that was about 4 hours away from Denver. It was in the middle of nowhere, and it was a 10-room bed and breakfast. I knew we were going to need more help, so I decided to hire 2 film students to help us on this trip. The day we arrived, I booked an interview with the innkeeper, except it didn't exactly come out the way I had planned. I'm going to leave the innkeeper nameless, but the only polite way that I can convey how the interview went with her is that she sounded possessed. This was a really hard decision for me, but I decided not to show the footage of her interview. I thought it would be disrespectful if I exposed something like that to the public, when inside she may not even realize that something's wrong. Let me explain some of my experiences with you, and then maybe it will give you a better visualization of why I think she's possessed. First of all, I want to state that I don't think possession or oppression is a joke or even words to be thrown around freely. I actually didn't believe in possession until I witnessed it happen, and the first time was when I was on set for Paranormal Challenge. When filming Paranormal Challenge, one of my teammates was followed back to our hotel by something that was dark, and it was after the night of the investigation. The next morning, we had to be on set at 9 a.m., so we were rushing pretty fast to get out of the hotel. I went to go find my other teammate, and he was in his room. He just sat there staring at the television. He wouldn't move or even get dressed. I had to threaten to leave him before he finally got dressed and left with us. When we arrived, the producers started miking us up to prepare us for filming. And then he walked into this big empty room, sat on a bar stool in the corner, and stared down at the floor. I was mad at him. I mean, here we are with the opportunity of a lifetime, and he's in a room pouting by himself. And now lights, camera, action, there's no sign of him anywhere. I walked into the room where he was, realizing that he'd been staring at the floor and sitting in the corner for more than an hour. I yelled at him. I told him to get in gear and that people were waiting on us. Then he looked up at me, and his eyes weren't his eyes. He screamed at me. He told me he hated me, he wished I would die, he called me every name under the sun, and words turned into violence, throwing and breaking things across the room. He was someone else. I'm not sure how much time went by after we were fighting, but I did forget that we were mic'd up, which meant Zach Bagans and the producers had heard everything that had been going on. And to finish the fight, he started making threats that he wanted to kill me. And all I can remember is the door flying open, Zach and 2 producers walking in. Somehow they got him to calm down because pretty soon he was back on the bar stool. Zach rushed me out into the hallway. They questioned me. They didn't understand how we'd been filming for a week and how he went from this bubbly guy to someone who's threatening to kill me. Zach asked me point blank, "Do you think he's possessed?" Whatever you want to call this, halted production for about another 6 hours. Zach and I even filmed a segment on getting followed home and possession, but it never aired. 6 hours later, miraculously, my teammate came out of it. We had filmed about 5 minutes of the actual possession or out-of-body occurrence, and when he came back to, he watched the video. He didn't even remember saying those things. He didn't remember acting that way. He didn't even remember leaving the hotel. And sadly, after our victory of Paranormal Challenge winners from Jerome, Arizona, he quit investigating. He started practicing religion heavily, and I haven't seen him for about 2 years. The Bross Hotel, built in 1906 here in Paonia, Colorado. The original owners, Mr. and Mrs. Bross, were pioneers of the town Paonia. Although Mr. Bross was popular for his own reasons, being called daddy of the town for taking care of everything, Mrs. Bross personally ran the inn as a professional businesswoman, which was extremely rare for a woman at the turn of the century. The current owner and innkeeper were struggling financially due to the poor town revenue. They did some research, educating themselves on the increase of property value with paranormal activity, and that's how they found us and invited us to come film. She was hoping that with some proof of the paranormal and with our paranormal exposure from our large audience, that she could not only help the town of Paonia, but also the bed and breakfast vacancy. Over the phone, the innkeeper informed me of feeling energies around the house, but she never had anything bad, dark, or scary. She went on to explain that she had only minimal communication with her eternal residents. She didn't give me all of the history of the Bross Hotel, so once we arrived, I wanted to interview her regarding history and eyewitness accounts. The person I was interviewing was not the person that I spoke with over the phone. She began referring to herself as Linda Bross, who was the original innkeeper and owner. So there's only one problem with that, which is Mrs. Bross had been dead since the 1930s. It was by far the strangest interview that I had ever done. Blake and I had a new concern when we were investigating. We were more scared to physically run into the possessed innkeeper than we were afraid of running into spirits. I was completely at the end of my rope with the innkeeper. Everything she had to say seemed so secretive. Originally, over the phone, she told me that the energy in the house was motherly and good and warm and welcoming. I got frustrated after the interview, so I decided to go upstairs. She said something when we discussed, like, on the phone and email about how, like, motherly things were, right? And, like, there wasn't any fear or whatever. And then nobody's ever had, like, a bad feeling and nothing bad has ever happened. But then when we get here, she tells me that there was this, like, violent outlash with the mirror. And to top it all off, the innkeeper mentioned this huge heavy mirror getting ripped from the wall and thrown by an unseen force. So it's just funny how maybe was she afraid, like, we wouldn't come because there was something bad that happened? Like, she was afraid we wouldn't show up because it was negative or something? I don't know. I'm sorry, but to me, that's a big deal. To me, that's malevolent, and I didn't understand why she wouldn't have shared this with me before. Obviously, okay, so that mirror's gotta be, like, what, 6 to 8 feet long by maybe 4 feet wide. She said that it fell off the wall, which is hung by mollies, which anybody that has ever hung a picture knows what a molly is, right? They're like these huge things you, like, drill in the wall and then put, like, the screw in. So for her not to share that information with me originally, I just thought it was kind of strange. But then we began the in-person interview, and she doesn't want to answer any of my questions. It's just funny what people will say when they talk to you on the phone or via message, and then what they tell you in person is completely different. Then Blake came up to tell me some information that she had shared with him off camera.
She was very, like, quick to talk about it. That one of the grandkids who was staying here wrote that they felt like a man was trying to scare them. And that whatever floor Mrs. Bross was on, the man was on the opposite floor.
Off camera, she told Blake that the great-grandchildren of the Brosses still come to visit the location.
So if Mrs. Bross goes to the 3rd floor, the man will come to the 2nd.
Interesting.
They try to avoid each other.
She didn't want to see it on camera. But then she told Blake how terrified the great-grandchildren were of the male energy, whom we assume to be Mr. Bross. Mrs. Bross and Mr. Bross is what I'm assuming, right?
That's what I think.
The darker energy is Mr. Bross, is my assumption.
Or Otto.
Or Otto. We're not sure. However, the innkeeper leaves this spirit nameless and calls it a dark energy. The other problem is there's another male that actually died in the house, and that was Otto. That's Mrs. and Mr. Bross's son. Otto was the only Bross child available to come and take care of the property when the parents were getting sick and dying. The innkeeper slightly mentioned that Otto was angry because he had to come back to Paonia to take care of his parents and the property. He had actually given up on being a minor league baseball player in Utah. Maybe this was a hint that this is the, quote, dark energy that the innkeeper was speaking of.
She said part of the agreement was Otto got to live here the rest of his life, right?
And it's undisclosed if he died here. But I'm assuming if it was, quote, the rest of his life. And if there truly was a dark energy here, why wouldn't she have told me that to begin with? Why did she only tell Blake when it was off camera? Yeah, they won't.
Yeah, no.
In person or record it. We're doing a freaking hour-long interview and you're not going to tell me you think that there's a dark energy here? I honestly have no idea what we're up for tonight. Hello?
There's a fan on.
We need to shut the door in here.
What the f was that? Did y'all hear that hiss?
Yeah, I heard that.
I didn't hear it.
I heard it.
After the hiss noise, Blake pointed the camera in the direction of the hallway. What he captured was unbelievable. He filmed a shadow person that was moving from the right side of the hallway onto the left side of the hallway. You can tell that this mass was actually in motion because it blocked the light that was on the outside onto the street through the window. Watch as it actually moves out of frame from the window, and you can actually see the street light clearly. Oh my god, something just poked me in the back. Dude. Besides being frustrated with the innkeeper, now I was upset with my crew. I quickly realized that paranormal film isn't something that they teach you in film school. Ooh, it's heavy up here, isn't it? It's really like chest pressure. I got a 0.4. You got it? 0.1. Are you in here still? Yes. Yes, thank you, whoever did that. You were awesome. 0.3. Did you hear that? In the hallway.
Is it the hallway or behind you?
I'm not sure. I think maybe behind me it was a footstep. Can you come up to us again? Make this beep. If you touch the antenna of this, it will beep. Shit. Did you see that? See if Linda's moving around in the kitchen because we can hear it clear as day.
I heard that too. I yelled for Linda. I got no answer. That's what I said. We have a lot of movement in the kitchen.
As we heard the footsteps in the basement, one of our film students caught it on camera. And at the same time as Blake and I are in the basement, we caught this strange shaped orb. Now what's even more interesting is that I showed this footage to a friend of mine. His name is Chuck Zukowski. Chuck has been on numerous television networks. He's a local Colorado UFO expert. Without hesitation, Chuck told us that this was not an orb. It's in fact a rod that's known as a Roswell rod. He told me that these rods have actually been researched as alien life forms. They were named Roswell after first being documented in Roswell, New Mexico. Now, I'm no UFO expert, but could there in fact be an alien life form at the Bros Hotel? What's this like? Or what's this about? Did you hear that?
Yes.
Can you just say hello? Yep. Yeah, I think this is kind of why Linda's doing this, is she's really kind of hurting financially. I know. They're fighting. Are you guys fighting again? We are?
Thank you.
Did you hear that?
I got that.
Oh, it's above us. Did you hear that? Did you hear that? Did you hear that? It's above us. During our evening break, we heard a loud crash in the basement. We stopped what we were doing and headed downstairs to check it out.
Whoa, you are just dark.
I don't feel right. I don't know why.
Ooh, yeah. Yeah.
Hold up, Ty, get behind me again.
Back up. Did you see that? First, I report that I don't feel well. Second, Blake is shooting the camera right at me. And clearly you can see his shadow because he's wearing headphones for audio. But something walks out from Blake's shadow, and the only way I can explain it is this. It appears that a shadow person steps out from Blake's actual shadow. And then the shadow person begins to walk towards the right side of Blake. Notice the shadow is almost 3D, physically walking towards Blake and away from me. Now take note that Blake has not moved, and you can tell he hasn't, because he's still shooting me with the camera, and the camera is still, it hasn't bounced around. So then who was it walking towards Blake? Because Blake actually calls it out and asks everyone to freeze. Clearly, whatever's happening here, or especially noted as an unknown entity, is defying the laws of physics and gravity. My ultimate goal after this investigation was for Blake and I to find that missing piece that we needed.